So what we're looking at today is we are going to let you know a little bit about the panelist conversation that we're having. I just want to thank so much Frank Barretto, Helen Skipper, and Tarik Greene for making the time and the energy to come together and have some dialogue today. You're going to hear more about them and more from them in a moment. For now, my name is Elizabeth Speck. I'm the principal consultant and founder with MindOpen Learning Strategies, and we will talk a little bit about MindOpen's work in trauma-informed de-escalation, what we're hearing, and the dots that we're connecting across different organizations that we're working with, and then turn it to that panelist discussion and leave time for audience questions and answers and responses. And our second part of the time together is for optional and informal networking. This is the second time that we've done an event like this, and the new relationships that have been made across organizations and across regions has been really lovely. So that's our goal for today. New connections, new knowledge, new tools that come from the exchange of community members who are doing this work and showing up. And this is also to raise funds and direct resources for the New York City Justice Peer Initiative. Kudos to everyone here for showing up, for registering. We have raised a respectable amount to support the work that you'll hear more about from Skip, and it's not too late. So feel free to point your camera to the browser and share that. And we can go to the next slide. All right. So you can see what's up here. You don't need me to read all the credentials, but I have worked in New York City Human Services for nearly 30 years, actually, I think more than 30 years now. And like many people, I came to do this work because I was motivated from some of my own painful experiences and learnings. But as I became more critically thinking, I developed much more of an understanding of how my race and my class protected me from becoming systems involved during times when I could have. And so bringing all of those dots together, and how can I show up in my persona and not re-traumatize by the way that I show up with the people that I work with, has become a really important question. So that brings us to, I'd like to introduce my training partner and a great leader of trauma-informed services in the reentry space, Tarik Greene. Tarik has been building community and creating spaces that make it possible for new opportunities that go beyond the status quo of systems involvement. And Tarik, I'll turn it over to you to speak about why this matters to you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I appreciate that introduction. First and foremost, let me say to this panel and to our audience that I had to practice some of these de-escalation principles earlier because Zoom has messed up my camera, which is why you don't see me. Otherwise, I would definitely be on. So these principles definitely come through in so many different areas of our lives. So yeah, you know, the reason why I think that this is so important is because including myself, but everyone who I grew up around, family members, friends, associates, all have some kind of trauma that they exhibit on a daily basis. You know, when I learned about some of the titles that's associated with it, you know, such as, you know, when I learned about things like bipolar or schizophrenia, those were things that I had seen as a youth coming up on a regular basis. It was just, it was just the way it is or the way people were. Or at least that's how I identified it in my own mind. So, that's what really gave me my first instance of wanting to learn more about the behaviors that I had learned or grew up seeing. Yeah, and so as we all know, it continues on, right, throughout each stage or level of our lives, and so learning more about it is definitely paramount, something that we must do. And so with that, I would like to introduce one of my esteemed panelists here, who you learn so much more about, who's such a staple and an important person in this field, especially when it comes to formerly incarcerated or justice impacted community. Helen Skipper. Helen?
I'm here. Thank you so much, Tarik. I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone here. Hello, everybody. My name is Skip. Please call me Skip. I'm already traumatized by systems. I refuse in my later years to be traumatized about my name as well. I want to thank you guys for having me here. Trauma and the effects of trauma is a topic that should be on everyone's lips. I'm here because I'm directly impacted by systems, because I spent 25 years going in and out of systems, most notably the criminal justice system. And that impact on me has really focused, honed, and it drives my worldview. So I'll talk more about that later. But just understand, those of us who are impacted by systems, we have a different worldview. What is a worldview? I'll get into that later. I would like now to introduce Frank Barretto. And I am so sorry, but I cannot see that screen. Oh, there it is. I can't see that screen. So I'm going to talk about my boo-boo Frank from a personal point. Frank and I started the CJA Peer Specialist Program. I have uplifted him. I have watched him grow. I have watched him develop and get to where he is now. This was not something like a proud mama bird telling the little birdie to fly, even though it looked like that. This was Frank stepping up and standing out and doing what he felt was right, when he felt it was right, and how he felt it was right. I am so proud to introduce Mr. Frank Barretto. I am the former senior manager of peer services, and I am introducing the present senior manager of peer services at CJA, and I just can't be prouder. I think I'm going to drop a tear here, but just give me a minute. Go ahead, Frank.
Wow, thank you, Skip. Thank you so much, Skip. That was a hell of an intro. I don't know how I could top that. But thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you to Tarik. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for having me as a part of this panel. It is a pleasure and an honor to be sitting among you all, and especially to be sitting on this panel with legendary individuals in this space who inspire me every single day to continue to do what it is that I do, and to do it effectively as well. So my name is Frank Barretto. I'm the Senior Manager of Peer Services with the New York City Criminal Justice Agency's Queen Supervised Release Program. Everything that you see here on this screen: certified peer specialist, recovery coach, stamps a certified trainer. I'm a veteran. I'm studying for my my master's at Toro. Those are bullet points. Those are all excellent talking points when it comes to my professional capacity. What you don't see here in the minutia is all of the trauma that I have endured over my life. And that is why I'm here. I am here to talk about that, to sharing that with you. And it is a pleasure and an honor to do so, because in my life, being from a marginalized community as a Hispanic, young Hispanic boy, growing up, my worldview was just violence, crime, drugs, death, despair, poverty. And that was my worldview. That's what I experienced growing up. It impacted me in negative ways. And I am so thankful that I am even alive to sit here and have this conversation with you. And that is not something that is lost on me, because a lot of times I used to tell myself that I should not even be here, which is a false statement. I have survived things that normal people would not have survived, but I have survived those things for a reason. And I am here sharing this space with you today to share with you and to inspire you all as well. We are not alone in this. We are all together in this when it comes to the criminal justice landscape, the criminal legal system, and the impact that we all have in a positive way together, the lives that we can affect in positive ways, day in and day out, working with individuals who are criminal justice impacted, and having that opportunity to give back to them in either the largest or even the smallest of ways to make meaningful impact and to change the system as being a part of the system as well. So I greatly thank every single one of you for joining. I greatly thank this panel for coming together and sharing. And I'm also here to learn from everybody as well. So here we go.
Thank you all so much. So just to ground us with some common language, an overview of this issue. Working definition, de-escalation, interpersonal communication that brings down the intensity of a conflict or reaction in order to prevent harm or provide help. And what are we talking about when we talk about trauma? Different things to different people, not one size fits all. To use Resmaa Menakem's very vivid description, it's the body's protective response to an event or series of events that it perceives as potentially dangerous. So we can go to the next slide. We can see why de-escalation often serves to escalate more, because when there is control involved, or when real experiences, past, present, or intergenerational, are not acknowledged, then the cycle of a power struggle continues. So the field, the workforce in human services is projected to rise 18% in the next decade. Human service professionals are the ones who provide crucial care in the most acute moments of crisis in an individual's or a family's life. They can make the difference between a positive trajectory and a negative spiral. So how many times do program participants or potential participants leave a program and not come back, or there's a rupture, or there are rules that make somebody become ineligible in some way, and the cycles continue and continue, contributing to the burnout of professionals and the burnout of people who wear multiple hats as human beings with their own experiences and as people in a role of being attentive to helping others. So let's go to the next slide. What is escalating? The need for the workforce, the level of crisis and unmet needs of people who are seeking services or who may be in survival mode and not even have the opportunity to intentionally seek services. The demands on the workforce with less resources are escalating. The undervaluing of the workforce with people who work in human services often being eligible for the same services that they may be providing based on income. Shout out to Human Services Council and the Advocacy for Just Pay. And at the same time, systemic harm to service seekers continues. The conditions are still there. And so many of us who might be drawn to this conversation today have a systemic view of working to dismantle or change systems, but at the same time needing to show up on a daily basis to relate with each other and to relate with the people who we seek to support. So we can go to the next slide. Trauma-informed care and principles has become a trend and a buzzword, and it's also a grounded set of practices that come from the wisdom of people with lived experience. And so with intention in our programs, attending to these areas can make a difference. Physical and emotional safety, trustworthiness and transparency, representation and cultural responsiveness, collaboration and mutual support, and voice and choice always. So how do we bring this into our prevention and our response to crisis? Next slide. So real fast, the acronym that has come from input from many members of the human services community that MindOpen uses in our trainings is peace tips. So there are many things that are not in our control, and there are some things that are in our control. So let's go to the next slide. The P in peace tips stands for prepare yourself. So that also goes to the need for trust in organizations to be able to share where strengths, where triggers may be. We can go to the next slide. The E in peace tips stands for environment scan. What's the physical layout, but also what's the power map of the people who are involved? We can go to the next slide. The A is for actively listen. And one of the resources that we'll share today is the crowdsourced tip sheet, 10 things to say besides calm down when seeking to help de-escalate a person or a situation. We can go to the next slide. The C in peace tips stands for conflict connection, and we use an assessment tool for some self-reflection on conflict style and use that as a common framework where people can have some focused conversations about what conflict signifies to them and how does that play into teamwork in difficult situations. And then we can go to the next slide. And that's the E in evaluate and learn. How often does a crisis or a tragedy or a conflict happen? And if we can get out of that cool moment, get out of that hot moment, and it passes, we don't want to think about it anymore because there also is a trauma residue there. So in order to build that culture of learning from things that may have happened well or things that may have happened in ways that were harmful, we want to continually have an evaluation process. And so those after action reviews, and one of the things that we will also share today is a model template for crisis response meetings. So we can go to the next slide. So that was a lot that we threw at you. So you can just take a breath. Again, appreciate yourself for being here today. And we're going to open this up. And I'm going to pitch our first discussion starter to Tarik. Tarik, can you talk a little bit about what you see as some of the pitfalls and the opportunities in how human service organizations tend to approach de-escalation?
Sure. Let me speak to the pitfalls of that first, and then we get to opportunities. But one of the things I notice is that there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of training around this particular topic and the subject. There's not a lot of, and in the trainings that do exist, I believe there should be a lot of more new approaches to this topic, because what we're learning, this is, first of all, this is a fairly and relatively new discussion and topic that we're having, period. And so one of the things that to keep in mind is that many of us are learning as we go, and some of the agencies and organizations that you and I have worked with in the past, Elizabeth, we find that a lot of the frontline workers, a lot of the counselors, a lot of the people who work directly with clients have not been adequately trained around trauma-informed care or trauma-informed approaches. And so I think that's one of the biggest things in terms of pitfalls. I think in terms of opportunities, what we find is that some of the more progressive agencies and or agency leaders, executive directors, and higher level management are really seeking out agencies and people who can come in and do those kind of trainings. And when that's done, you begin to see some changes in the culture, of those companies or those organizations. And I think it's always the opportunity for growth and development on all levels, not just for frontline staff or counselors, but for hierarchy as well, or for management level staff as well. And I think that's where it really comes from. It has to come from the top down and not from the bottom up. So here at TRIOA, which is my agency, the Reentry Institute of America, we provide housing, transitional housing for men and for women. And one of the things that I find myself having to employ on a regular basis is a trauma-informed approaches, because they're, and currently in my latest house, there are 22 beds. I currently have 13 people, but there are 13 people with very different responses to some of the same traumatic circumstances, which is something that, you have to learn and know in this field, which is that, people can be in the same exact set of circumstances, experience the same exact trauma, but respond differently to it, right? It doesn't, it's not like one size fits all. So, and so just learning the different approaches will definitely aid you in being able to deal with some people. And really quickly, all of us who do work directly with the population, we've probably all experienced situations where someone has said something, came at us in a very hostile manner. And sometimes we come in, I don't know, whatever a person may be experiencing at a particular time, maybe death in the family, maybe relationship issues, whatever, but we're not in the mood for someone to yell and scream at us, especially for something that we have no control over, we didn't do, or what have you. And so, trauma-informed care approaches, they come in really handy at those moments when you really want to say to a client, watch how you speaking to me, or you really want to say, that's not my problem, that you have to deal with that yourself. These approaches come in excellent at those moments. So those are just a few of the things, that I've come across in my experience.
Thanks, Tarik. And that's the perfect segue to let's dig into the peer specialist movement. And Frank, can you share with us more about the principles of the peer specialist movement and how this can be helpful in all aspects of human service organizations?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Tarik, for that insight and that perspective. It is so important to really think about the framework of trauma-informed support as we support others who are impacted by the criminal legal system. When it comes to peer support, for those who either are unaware, peer specialists are individuals who have their own lived experience, whether that's mental health, substance use, criminal legal involvement, things of that nature. it's not just having the experience, it's having the credentials and the expertise to be able to provide support through that lens of lived experience, knowing that we have had to address our own traumas and find ways to overcome that in our own recovery, and then model that for the individuals that we work with. So there are multiple competencies and core values of peer support that are really applicable all throughout the human services field. So 5 of those core competencies for peer services. The first one is being person-centered. You hear that term a lot, and what does it really mean? Being person-centered is understanding that when it comes to peer support or any type of support that is being provided, it's always directed by the person receiving those supportive services. They're the ones that are in the driver's seat of that support that we're wrapping around them. That's why we prefer to use the term participants as opposed to the term client. You think it's interchangeable, but for somebody who is actively participating in their own recovery, language is important. Being person-centered really personalizes the support to align with that individual's specific hopes, their goals, and their preferences, and to be able to respond to their specific needs as well. Another core competency is being recovery-oriented. You also hear that a lot as well. That is really just understanding that recovery is holistic. It's a holistic approach. There's multiple pathways. Recovery does not look the same for everybody. It looks different for everybody. For individuals who are peer specialists who have had their own recovery process, it's really about giving back and instilling and providing hope to those they support with the purpose of allowing them to envision and achieve a meaningful and purposeful life. It focuses on strengths, it focuses on empowerment and not enablement, and allows individuals to really make the positive choices that they need to make for themselves. Another core competency, of course, is being trauma informed, which means utilizing a strength-based framework that emphasizes physical, psychological, and emotional safety, and also creates opportunities for individuals to rebuild a sense of control and empowerment in their own lives. And then really what we do is relationship based. So a relationship focused approach to the work that we do. Our ability as peers with lived experience to be able to tell our own powerful stories allows us to connect with others in a meaningful and authentic way. And that's really the foundation of the work that we do. It's the relationship between peers and those that they support. It's an intentional relationship. It's a respectful relationship, and it instills trust, empathy, collaboration, and mutuality. Lastly, the 5th core of competency is voluntary. Understanding that the services that we offer as peers there's nothing mandatory about it. We work in partnership with those that we support. We don't work for anybody, they don't work for us. It's a reciprocal relationship. We don't dictate the types of services that are provided. We don't dictate the elements of any types of recovery plans. Participation is always contingent on individual choice. And for peer services, peer support works best when the individual wants it, not when it's forced upon them. You have to want to participate in your own recovery in order to engage in a positive way. There are a lot of aspects of peer support that are also applicable. The idea of learning versus helping, which is really just sharing space with somebody and really learning from each other, as opposed to being in a helper-helpee relationship. Focusing on the relationship itself and not individualizing it, caring for the relationship between yourself and that individual, and instilling a sense of shared responsibility. Also, moving away from fear towards hope and possibility. As we create collaborative partnerships that allow for possibility, it really leads to the ability to identify strengths in individuals that they may not even be aware of. It's really about building connections. It's really about helping each other understand each other's worldview and how we come to know what we know, establishing mutuality, which is redefining help as a co-learning and growing process, and moving toward connection as opposed to moving away from what we don't want. It's about moving towards the things that we do once we identify those things, and doing it from a trauma-informed lens. It's just being mindful, especially as peers having lived experience, to not be re-traumatized or to re-traumatize others. Compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma are very, very, very real for peers, for individuals who have lived experience. We wear that a lot differently than everybody else, so it impacts us differently as well. And in a few slides, I'll talk about what support looks like for individuals with lived experience who may be traumatized, and the type of support we need in engaging others to help de-escalate a crisis as well.
Frank, thank you so much, and really appreciate how you emphasize the voluntary nature as well. But part of what's so interesting about the New York Criminal Justice Agency is that you have shown that it is possible to engage in non-coercive service relationships within a system that, you know, even if supervised release may be on paper voluntary, anything that is part of the criminal legal system, you know, is not based in free will. So you're really, it really like it gives us a sense of the possibilities to think outside the box. And that's a great segue to Skip, to bring us to the root causes. And how can organizations move beyond the default crisis response model to more transformative approaches that address the root causes of crisis and harm?
Thank you, everyone. Frank, thank you so much for that comprehensive talk. And it's not an explanation, it is a talk, it is real talk about what peers do. I'm sorry, I'm just going through something and now someone's at my door. Give me 1 minute. Frank, could you jump back in for a minute?
Sure, no problem. I want to go back to something that Elizabeth mentioned before, as far as the mandatory versus voluntary nature of what we do specifically here at supervised release. So for those who are aware of the supervised release program, it's in lieu of cash bail. The purpose of supervised release is to really ensure that an individual returns back to court in lieu of cash bail, but also providing that individual the opportunity to remain connected to the community. And it allows us to identify the services and the supports that they need. So while supervised release itself is the mandatory aspect, they have to come in with us, meet their case manager, check in on a consistent basis. For the peer services aspect, that is the voluntary piece. So when we receive a referral for somebody that's interested in peer services, it is on a voluntary basis. There's nothing mandatory about the peer services. It's in addition to the case management services that they receive. And once they have an understanding of what peer services is, an individual with lived experience who has been through something similar as you and can help you navigate your own circumstances while modeling what recovery looks like to you. Once they have that understanding and once they really start to engage with us and we focus on the relationship while being trauma informed, they are very receptive to it. They are very receptive to the support that we're able to offer. They're very receptive to the needs that we're able to identify and the way that we're able to connect with them. And it just leads for a better experience for them while we're focusing on making sure that they stay out of the system and make sure that we drive a wedge in that revolving door as well. So I just wanted to just kind of highlight what you brought up because I thought that was really important. Go ahead, take it away, Skip.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Frank. Apologies. There's so much going on in my life and it's still full of trauma. So the question was,
can I just not to cut you off at all, but I just want to highlight this moment that we had a conversation when we were preparing for the panel around like what is professionalism and who creates professionalism. And I think that probably I speak for everyone here where we don't want to have to show up like not how we are. So take a breath and thank you, Skip. And, you know, Tarik's not on camera, and it, it is what it is. So
Thank
it's a
you.
flow.
Thank you. But I'm gonna always show up for my community. And guess what? My community even includes whoever perpetrated the harm on my family member. At the end of the day, when you are impacted by systems, and this could be for a variety of reasons. I can get into my academic hat and talk about strain and social bond theory, labeling theory, neighborhood disorganization theory. There are so many theories out there. But at the end of the day, it's about giving people the support and the help they need. And when you've been traumatized by systems, when you've been labeled, when you are impacted, you frequently don't get the help. So the question was, how can organizations move beyond the default crisis response models towards more transformative approaches that address the root causes of crisis and harm? Number one, we've been talking about this since the beginning. We're going to talk about lived experience now. We're not just going to talk about lived experience. We're going to talk about taking that concept of lived experience and reworking it and looking at it as lived expertise. The default crisis response mode has always been clinical. There, I put it out there. I said it. Beat me up if you want to, but it's always been clinical. Clinicians who have academic learning, who are not from the same communities, who have not walked in the same shoes, who have not gone through the same things, and who don't look like us, and who do not create relationships. One of the key principles of peer support, they don't create relationships with us. We're just a number, we're a client. We probably have identification numbers, and they would probably call us by those numbers like they do our inmate numbers if they had a chance. But we need to look beyond that, and we need to start incorporating more lived experience. Not just lived experience, but lived experience that is successfully transformed to lived expertise. I have professional lived expertise. My lived experience consists of 25 years of going in and out the criminal justice, the substance abuse, and the mental health systems. My lived experience consists of me sleeping on park benches and on rooftops, of me being in every shelter for women here in New York City. Yeah, that was my lived experience. But out of that, I transformed all of that into lived expertise. Now, my lived expertise does have some academic tenets. I'm in school pushing toward a master's in criminology, and then after that a PhD in criminology. So call me an academic if you will, but you can never call me an academic without recognizing and understanding that the basis of all of this, of everything I do, of everything who I am, is because of my lived experience that is now lived expertise. So my worldview on things are very, very, very different from yours. And it would behoove us, as we start looking at crisis response, as we start looking at the root causes of crisis and harm. If we're going to dig down that deep, if we're going to drill down, if we're going to go into weeds about that, we need to look at how all of this started, and not only how it started, but how we can roll this back to the beginnings by using peer support, by using people who create relationships, by using those who have been in the fire, who have fought the good fight, and are still swinging that sword. We're still standing. This is what is going to help us move to the next level. But we have people who want to throw clinical aspects at us. And believe me, I am not saying that clinical aspects are wrong. I'm just saying when you get into something like this, you need someone with lived expertise. You need someone who has been through this very same thing. I thought I was impacted by everything that could be thrown at me from coming from a marginalized community, being a Black woman, being a masculine orientated Black woman, part of the LGBTQ community. I thought I went through it all. Yet today I am going through something else. Today I just learned that a member of my family is now the victim of gun violence. It's now laying dead in the morgue somewhere. But yet I still stand, because the resilience that we build from going through these systems, from going through these traumatizing experiences, from being traumatized ourselves, this enables us to build that resilience that allows us to get up and keep it pushing and making a difference in somebody's life. That's what happens with peer support. We've been through it all. Yet we still do what we do. We are still hope dealers. And yes, we return back into the very same systems that hurt us, that traumatized us, that didn't believe in us, that thought we weren't going to do anything, be anything. I'm a part of the never woulda, coulda, shoulda club. I was never going to be anything. I was never going to do anything. Every time I went to jail, they tried to put me up under the jail. And that was my plight for the rest of life. Today, I am the executive director of the New York City Justice Peer Initiative. Today, I am a criminologist. I am an author. I write scholarship, academic scholarship. But yet, I'm the one that you said wasn't going to do anything or be anything. And I take me, just like Frank takes him, and Tarik takes him, and Elizabeth takes her. We take all of that, which is us, our lived experiences, our professional expertise, and we use that to mentor, support, and assist others so that the system doesn't build any more Skips, doesn't build any more Franks, even though I myself could use 1 or 2 more Franks in my organization. So that it doesn't build any more Elizabeths. But then again, we could use about 5 or 6 more Elizabeths with more MindOpen organizations like hers.
Can I glow you up for a minute? Is it okay?
Right? It's okay.
Okay.
Don't make me cry on this webinar. Don't make me do it, because it's coming. Don't make me do it.
Well, this is why an entity like the NYC Justice Peer Initiative is so important, because you're also exposing how the lived experience and lived expertise can be exploited in organizations. And that is a very, very real pattern of tokenization, of not having expertise compensated equitably, and of putting the people with lived experience at the most risk of harm in volatile situations. And there can be the drive, right, to keep showing up. But what you're doing with the New York City Justice Peer Initiative is professionalizing in a good way, in sustaining and getting to being sustainable and advocating at a systemic level for the health of the workforce. So I really want to shout that out. Right? And that takes us to, yeah, I mean, and you've really touched on a lot of this, but right, what does it mean?
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. So Frank, yeah. What does it mean? And we can, expand this question too, to really value. And, when we talk about particular systems, and we're talking about a lot about criminal legal system, but the separation or the distinction between systems that are that exist because of harm and injustice, that's kind of an artificial separation, right? Like all different kinds of organizations are here on this call and maybe working with the same peoples and people and families. So what is best practice for really meaningful incorporation and elevation of the voice of peers?
Thank you. I think that's probably one of the most important questions to ask. When it comes to when it comes to hiring and employing and supporting individuals with lived experience at the agency, it's there's a lot of nuances that are not always considered. I can bring up so many different examples of some of the challenges that we faced here at CJA in incorporating peer services. But we have had a lot of success in incorporating peer services, individuals with lived experience, into a traditional case management clinical model. Prior to Skip and I coming to CJA, peer support was very minimal, and there was a huge disconnect. There was a lack of understanding of what peer support actually was, the competencies, the practices, the principles, the core values of peer support. It just didn't really land with people. So something that Skip and I used to say a lot is the proof is in the work. This is evidence-based practice. So it's a matter of just getting to work and just aligning the work. There were a lot of challenges in that. We started right before the pandemic. Our best work is always done in person with that individual. So it really disconnected us in a lot of ways, not just from the participants we were serving, but also from our fellow staff members, other case managers and clinicians who did not always have that understanding of what it's like to work alongside a peer specialist. I think the most important thing for true integration is for those in leadership positions at whatever agency is incorporating peer services to develop that true understanding of peer services and its unique methodology, the core competencies, the values, and the principles. As peers, we're not clinicians, nor do we have a claim to be clinicians. We are hired explicitly for the trauma we have overcome and our ability to provide support to others through that particular lens. That is why we are employed. Our ability to credentialize our lived experience, to develop those competencies and to apply those competencies to the work that we do. Our needs as individuals with lived experience are unique, and that's crucial to understand when integrating peer services. Like I said, we're hired explicitly for our lived experience. Some individuals are not too far removed from their own lived experiences. And some people are 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and at any given moment can slide right back into those circumstances as well. So it's really important to create those safe spaces and those therapeutic spaces to be able to support those staff members with lived experience. But what does that look like at an agency? What does that look like here at CJA? What it looked like is elevating staff members into leadership positions who also have lived experience. So here at CJA, you have the certified peer specialist or the certified recovery peer advocate. The next step up would be the peer coordinator, who is not a supervisor of the peer staff, but they're the additional layer of support. They're intermediary between that staff member and leadership. After that, you have a peer supervisor who directly supervises our peer specialists, and then they report to the manager and the senior manager. So that is the structures that we've created. We call it a support structure, not a career ladder or anything like that. It is important to create that career trajectory, but it's more so about the type of support that you offer those individuals that are doing this work through the lens of lived experience. Every single individual I mentioned, from the peer specialist all the way up to myself, senior manager, we all have lived experience. We've all been through some things. We've all had to overcome some trauma. We are reflective of the communities that we serve and support. I am from the hood. I am from Queens. I am from Far Rockaway. I grew up there and suffered some horrific things growing up. And I'm still very well connected to the communities that I serve and support. And as is my team of individuals with lived experience as well. And that is really important too when it comes to supporting our communities. In the criminal justice space, when it comes to de-escalation practices, that's a requirement for providing person-centered services. That is a requirement for the work that we do, for both ourselves as the workers and for the participants that we serve. The participants, especially here in supervised release, they face very unique challenges. Addressing these challenges requires patience, it requires compassion, it requires empathy, it requires a unique level of understanding, and that approach should be consistent for all staff members. For us, for staff members with lived experience, it's really about how we face those challenges of vicarious trauma, how we face those challenges when it comes to compassion fatigue, how we respond to individuals who are in crisis, and kind of what Tarik was saying earlier on, like how do we emotionally regulate ourselves to learn how to respond instead of reacting and not get into our bag of feelings when faced with a crisis as well. And what types of supports do we have for our staff members to either debrief or to receive that additional layer of support? And then our allies. For example, we had an instance here at the agency where we had to call 911 on an individual who was experiencing a physical health issue, not a mental health, not any type of other crisis. It was a physical health situation. We had to call 911. There was a massive police response, which triggered me because of my experiences in being apprehended by police and being encountered by police in the past. What was important for me in that space at that very moment was having an ally, a clinician in a leadership position that was really advocating for not only for our participants' needs and really trying to de-escalate the situation, but also supporting me in my role and knowing that I was traumatized and triggered myself as well. I found that to be very important. As an agency, the work that we've done with MindOpen in the past is very crucial to our success in de-escalation because of the components of the P.E.A.C.E model that we've implemented here. Also because of the crisis management staff that we have to address certain crises and to provide those supportive spaces to our staff members too, especially for individuals with lived experience and how we wear that compassion fatigue and that vicarious trauma and how it can impact us in negative ways too. And then a lot of times other staff members who don't have lived experience rely on those with lived experience to support them and to support the other staff members as well. But it's important for us to have that support and to have those measures put in place and to have that understanding across the board throughout the agency and the buy-in of what peer support is, the competencies, the practices, and principles, and really establishing a positive intent of supporting us in the most meaningful way possible.
All right. I knew it was overly ambitious to keep this talk to an hour, but time is a construct. Let us just open it up for audience Q&A. I'm aware some people might have to hop off, but I hope you can stay on, and let's just go to it. Do we have any questions or comments or responses?
We did get some great comments earlier in the chat as we're waiting for other questions to come in. Everyone felt like, especially Skip had a powerful message that was really resonating with everyone. So thank you for that. There was a mention about the DSM-5. I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that creating issues in this as well. And then we just have a great new comment in the chat of thank you to the panelists and organizers. This was extremely powerful, informative, and thought-provoking.
I have a quick comment on the DSM-5. As somebody that lives with a diagnosis, it's important to remember, especially in the space that we work in the intersectionality the of all of the various systems within the criminal legal system. You are not your diagnosis. My diagnosis does not define you. Your criminal charges do not define you. None of that defines me as an individual. I define me as an individual, how I meet those challenges, how I've overcome those challenges, how I have been able to model recovery throughout those challenges for other individuals. That is the definition that I always look at. When it comes to a diagnosis, have feelings about it as a non-clinician. I will reserve those feelings because this is about facts. The fact of the matter is that your diagnosis does not define you. Your criminal charges do not define you. It is how you overcome. It is how you move past. It is how you move forward. It is the lessons that you learn along the way and how you apply those lessons going forward in life that define who you are as a human being. Never a diagnosis, never a criminal charge. All of that to me is subjective when it comes to the whole person. And when you're looking at when you're looking through a holistic approach, when we utilize the 8 dimensions of wellness to define a person, criminal charges or a diagnosis does not apply to that.
Thank you for that, Frank. And I want to carry that idea about intersectionality just a little bit further. So Frank talked about intersectionality between who you are and your record. One of the reasons I decided to go into criminology is because I was looking at all those theories and trying to figure out, like, where do I lie? Where do I sit? And not one theory kind of, I want to say, accurately portrayed me. Because all of this is not really built for those of us who have been institutionalized, those of us who have been marginalized. So there's intersectionality in everything we do, we are, we be, and we are becoming. All of that leads into one another. All of that builds on one another. All of my lived experiences, if someone asked me today, would I go back in time and redo them? I'm sorry, my answer would be no. While I admit I made some wrong choices, my mother told me don't cross the street, went out an adult, and I ran across the street. New York City Department of Transportation tells you don't walk on the yellow line in the middle of the street. Hell, I went down there kikiing and cuckooing. I went around the block a couple of times on my tricycle, even though my mom said stay in front of the house. No, I was around the block and down the corner. I've created some harm. Harm has been heaped on me, but I will not take anything back. There are no do-overs. And I don't want to do over because all of that led me to the beautiful place I'm in today. All of that led me to me being able to sit up here and speak to you guys. And I apologize because I had to jump off for a minute. I was getting just a tad bit emotional, but it's okay because I'm human. I'm not made of steel. I am made of thoughts and emotions. And this resilience that we build, this resilience that we carry. I remade myself when I became a peer. And I realized that I had to do that in order to support myself and in order to protect myself. So I became that swaggy Skip. So I know you've heard me talk about being unapologetic. Yeah, I'm unapologetic and I should have a fedora on because every time I say that, I tip my hat to the side because it's the swag of it all. But being unapologetic was my defense mechanism. And it is how I've been able to walk this path without losing it, without falling by the wayside. Yet still I stand tall. Because we have to realize that we create resiliency in everything we do, every step we take, every move we make. We're adding just another layer of resiliency. So maybe you won't become unapologetic, Skip, but you'll become unapologetic you. And that's where you need to be. We are not in a position to apologize for the things we went through. We never will. What we are here to do is make a difference and move this work forward. We're here to transform these systems that harmed us, that we created harm in. But we are the ones stepping up to transform these systems. Thank you.
I want to take a minute to just to say to Skip, appreciate you so much. Always have, and you know, it's been a long distance relationship for you and I. You know, I've seen you in a couple of places and read a couple of your and stay on top of you on LinkedIn. But definitely hearing you speak, I appreciate all that you're saying. And I'm wondering, is there anything that we can do in this audience and on this panel as a community to help you in this time of need for you?
Oh, thank you so much for that. I'm gonna say no, but not in a bad way, because I still have to stand tall and there's work to be done, and I'm here to do it. And this is my work, you know, and I'm not going to turn my back on it. It's going to be a difficult time, but you know what? It was difficult for them 25 years I went in and out. It was difficult for every shelter system I was in. It was difficult for every drug program I was in. It was difficult for every mental health diagnosis and treatment and therapy they gave me. Yet still, I am here. And I'm going to remain here. You know, and I'll work this out. I'll get through it with friends and family and support, talking about it, which is why I had to drop what was going on with me today. You know, we have to learn how to build these coping mechanisms within ourselves. We can seek outside support, but you know who's going to help you get over it? That's who's going to help you get over it. And you got everything you need to get over it. Thanks, sir.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm going to get my hat. I'll be right back.
That's right. That's right. Really quickly, I know we press for time, but I want to take this opportunity to say to all of the professionals in the audience here that when you work with, just listen, just keep for a minute in your heart and in your mind what Skip was just saying, and then transfer for a minute to some of the clients that you'll work with who might not be able to articulate as well as Skip what they're going through, what just happened to them, what they're currently dealing with. And just remember, in those times when you have a client who comes off in a certain kind of way, just think, ask the appropriate questions to try to get behind it and try your best. It's not easy to say don't do it, but I want to say to all of you, try your absolute best not to let some of the things that you might be going through at the exact same moment overtake or overshadow your client or your participant, the person that you're working with. Just, try to use these principles. And if you don't, I keep saying these principles, and it's so unfortunate that we really didn't have time to actually give you some of those principles, what they are. But if you, do research or have your company, speak to the higher ups and have your company bring in people to train in that way. Bring in MindOpen to your company to teach and to teach some of these principles. And yeah, let's just show up for each other like this and in the way that we do. Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there for everybody.
Thanks, Tarik. And unapologetic, swaggy Skip.
That's right.
That's all it is. I had to put on my hat. You know what I'm saying? Oh, the swagginess of it all. Thank you so much.
So I know we're getting some questions with the time and all that. I see people are here. Let's keep this going until 2:15, and then we'll go to the unrecorded part. Are there some more questions from the audience?
We had a great question on, there are a lot of overlapping themes that align with clinical therapy, Although research application and training is awesome, you just can't teach human experience, which is in and of itself so therapeutic. It's a bit more of a question, but let me add to that Karen's comment of how do you deal with agencies necessary for the success of the peer moving through, past, and away from the legal system who do not understand or purport to use this framework that impacts the peer? What do you do as peer support? The sort of necessary evil of dealing with agencies.
Yeah, so a lot of times it's going to be a hard road. When Frank and I started the peer specialist portion of supervised release, we walked into a situation where there were clinicians who didn't know who we were, what we do, and how we do it. So it became a learning opportunity. And we should look at these things like that. Not everybody understands what peer support is. Not everybody understands what peers do. Not everybody understands how we do it. Use that as a learning opportunity and teach people. Show by doing, show by supporting materials, give a couple of presentations. Frank and I did presentations with the whole staff, you know, and we worked our way up to that, whereas that presentation was now part of onboarding, and onboarding for all staff, not just those working in supervisory, because this is how we teach as we go along. We're not going to do like with like. If you don't like me, then I don't like you. No, we're bigger and better than that. We're going to learn you. We're going to train you.
Yeah, that part, Skip. We're gonna learn you. You know, that's really the key. My whole philosophy is educate and inform. When and going back to what Skip was saying, when I first started here at CJA, and I remember the first day I walked in the door, I got looked like I had 6 heads when I said I was a peer specialist. What is a peer specialist? Who are you? Are you coming to take my job? You're not a counselor. You're not a clinician. You're not this. You're not that. So I was told what I wasn't, but nobody could actually tell me what I was and what my purpose was. That was for me to inform others of what my purpose was, to really institute the competencies and the practices and the principles and the core values of peer support, and then let the work speak for itself because it is evidence-based practice. But we took every single opportunity that we could to educate and inform the staff, and then just really implement it in the work in a very collaborative manner. For us, the key piece to all of this is what I call programmatic synergy. So we have clinicians on one side and case managers on one side, and then we have peer staff on the other side. How do you bring these disciplines together, respecting each other's disciplines, but really allowing each other to learn from each other and utilizing these disciplines and then giving it to the participant who benefits the most? Now, how do you educate and inform an agency and staff members on that? That is exactly what we did. We developed PowerPoints, we developed workshops, we integrated it into the agency onboarding. So now every single staff member that comes on board this agency has to sit through this workshop for 3 hours and gain a deep understanding. And it's a very interactive workshop too. It's not just throwing information at you. It's making sure that you walk away with a deep understanding of the values and the principles of peer support and how to utilize not only our services, but us as individuals with lived experience, because our role is to supporting other staff members in supporting our participants with understanding that that participant is in the driver's seat because we are person-centered and recovery-oriented. So it's really about having those very challenging conversations and really advocating for peer support and advocating for your staff as well. But the key to that is really doing it in a professional capacity, because as peers, and Skip, you know this very, very well, we are very, very passionate. We are very, very passionate about the work that we do, not only just what we do, how we do what we do, and why we do what we do. And sometimes we convey ourselves in a very passionate way when advocating for what's right when it comes to people with lived experience. But for others, it doesn't really land that way. It can be seen as aggression, it could be seen as insubordination, and all of these negative connotations when it comes to passion. But if there is no passion without purpose, then what is the point? And the purpose is for a greater good. And that is something that I have instituted here and that I instilled in myself and everybody else. We are here for a purpose that is greater than ourselves. There are people on the other side of this door right here coming into this office that need us the most. They are out there suffering. They are suffering. Society has them at their lowest, and they're going through absolute hell. They're coming here for our support. A lot of time they don't have anybody else to turn to. So whatever it is that I'm going through, however I'm feeling about my coworker or my supervisor or this person or that person, at the end of the day, that is for me to emotionally regulate myself, because my purpose is to support those who need it the most and to support my staff who is supporting those individuals who need it the most as well. But to make sure that the agency does it right, I have to be very vocal about it, have to be at the table, make some elbow room at the table, pull up a seat, and make sure that you're vocal about what peer support is and how it can benefit the entire organization. Once you have that understanding and you have that buy-in, it's really about just having the autonomy to utilize those services in the most effective way possible, understanding that it is the participants, it is the people on the other side of all of this that are going through it right now that are benefiting the most from those dual services, clinical services and peer services, and the synergy that really brings it all together in the most respectful way possible. That's my 2 cents on it.
So I think Elizabeth had queued up. We have one final question before we'll go to the connection and networking. So this is, thank you for sharing the term lived expertise. It really added more context to our journey, not just as peer support, but also as humans as well. With that being said, I would like to ask, how does this conversation translate for youth peer specialists transitioning into adulthood as a peer specialist adult working with a different demographic?
It translates the same way as adults, but we have to add into the mix, the intersectionality that youth go through, especially those who have been involved in the juvenile justice system. As I often teach when I talk about incarceration, I often say that everybody experiences incarceration different. It's not the same for none of us. It's not the same for me as a Black woman, nor is it the same for Frank as a Black Latino male. It is not the same for youth. It is not the same for men. It is not the same for someone who's indigenous or someone who is an immigrant. It is not the same. The juvenile justice system has a lot of intersectionality with the adult system, because it's usually thought that you're just going to travel from one to the next. But we have to give a nod to the specific points and touch points that youth face as referred to what adults face or don't face. All you have to do is interject that into the juvenile peer specialist system, and you'll see that it's one and the same, with for a few little touch points about youth.
I think it's about growth and maturity, especially as a young adult. Understanding that just having lived experience alone doesn't necessarily make you the expert. It's how you apply that lived experience, what you're able to learn from that lived experience, and how you're able to develop yourself and turn that experience into expertise. And for a young adult who is on the cusp of adulthood and transitioning while dealing with all of the trauma that they're dealing with, it's really about that continued growth and really just reinforcing the core competencies and the practices and the principles of peer support, and using that to really connect with other young adults that are going through everything that they're going through and supporting them in a meaningful way. And especially when you think about young adults and the way that you're able to connect with somebody younger versus somebody that may be of an older demographic, and the commonality when it comes to that, and the creative ways that you can really engage with younger participants and really connect with them, whether it's the music, whether it's the art, whether it's the sports, whether it's just something that they love and something that they're deeply passionate about. It's really about kind of reinforcing that as well. But, you know, in that transition phase, it's really about continued growth and who is supporting the supporters as well. What types of support do those young individuals have as they're turning their experience into expertise? Who are their leaders? Who is modeling recovery for them? It's the Skips of the world that we're looking at. It's the Tariks, it's the myself of the world that young adults should be looking at and saying, you know what? Yeah, you fell down 8 times, but you got up 9. If you could get up 9 times, I could get up 9 times too. And then we demonstrate that to them. And that allows them to live their most meaningful lives. And especially being so young and going through what they've gone through, to be able to be so young and to give back to others in such a meaningful way. And you got a hell of a life ahead of you if you're able to turn the corner that young and do that in such a meaningful, impactful way. I'm very passionate about the youth. I was the type of person that I think back now on my childhood and my young adulthood, and if I had a peer then, the way that I've become a peer now, half the things that I've been through, I probably would have never went through because I would have had somebody helping me to learn along the way. Better late than never for me, but at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to, is the reinforcing of the competencies and the principles, and then just continuing to learn and grow as well.
A round of applause or virtual hug and solidarity. Thanks everyone